So we're going to switch into cognitive distortions. And I drew this drawing long time ago with a young girl who told me that just all the flowers look gigantic and I feel like I'm about 6 inches tall. I look out my window and the whole world looks so overwhelming. And some days it's so beautiful and some days it's so scary. And there was a quote I saw somewhere, don't believe everything you think. And we're going to talk about cognitive distortions and how our thinking can change our feeling. Just to review, last week, Ray talked about the decisions made and the conclusions drawn from the perspective of a child may remain in place forever unless examined and challenged. All those thoughts, images, meanings that we have stored away in the file folders of our brain are there influencing how we see the world if we don't take them out and challenge them. And the other piece again was managing our emotions means managing our thoughts, our images, our fantasies, and our meanings, because the thoughts, images, fantasies, and meanings create our feelings. So here's something to ponder. Precision in language leads to precision in thinking, which leads to more effective emotional management. For example, a friend of mine, I have lots of friends who are creative and sometimes can go a little bit nuts, but this is kind of some of the things she'll say to me. I have to get away from the valley, but the coast is way too expensive. I should have saved up more money. I never can pick the right day to go to the coast. It will rain and be cold the whole time. I will pack the wrong clothes and I'll just absolutely freeze. And when I get there, no one will want me to hang out with them, even though I was the one who did all the work to make the trip happen. I will be an outsider like I always am. Again, precision in language leads to precision in thinking, which leads to more effective emotional management. So you're going to ponder that this week. And Ray's going to talk a little bit about some of the distorted thinking and the language that goes along with it and how that impacts how we look at the world and how we manage our emotions. Trauma survivors require training in emotional management. We become more anxious. We become more too compulsive. We become too jealous. We start having these distorted feelings and we're magnifying them. And often that comes because we do not have precision in language and we have not looked at our thinking patterns and the meanings we've created. We carry inside of us our mental file folders. We have these file folders with thousands of messages and meanings and memories and images that most of the time others have put there, and we've not said, oh, I think I'm going to adopt that, or I'm not going to adopt that. And sometimes we let these competing images and messages from the past almost drown out our sense of peace and our ability to think rationally. It's like, oh, this person's and this message from this message, and I'm not really rationally thinking. And inside of us, we have a pathological critic and we have a compassionate observer. And I'm going to turn this over to Ray. And if you want to talk about, Ray, these two sides of us that are listening in on us and talking to us and drowning us out.
Okay. All right. The first thing I want to do, though, is I want to remind people that if you want to get this workbook, I would encourage you to do it, because everything I'm going to talk about today is in here, and even more. There's quite a bit more in here. Now, if you don't, again, you can get it at the NC Print on Central Avenue. The only charge you'll have is for the printing, and but I would really encourage you to do it, because the more you can go over this stuff, the better off it'll be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and give you an overview of it. And starting with, I'm going to talk a little bit about the compassionate witness. Now, that's not a term that I coined. That was somebody else in cognitive therapy that coined that. But what it involves is almost like separating from yourself a little bit and creating a compassionate witness to your thinking processes. So you're kind of monitoring them. Now, for young people, they have a really hard time doing that because they're mostly reactive to the world around them. But for people, adults, we can kind of begin to monitor our thinking processes and be careful about what we're thinking. Now, the compassionate witness has no judgment. There's no judgment to the thoughts. It's just watching them. It's not making critical judgments about them. Now, the other part is kind of like, I learned this from a client of mine, and what he told me is he told me the story about, he was coming to the office, and he passed this guy on the street that was a panhandler. And the panhandler asked him for the money, and this guy, Brian, said, "No, I don't have any money to give you." And he walked right by him. And as soon as he did that and walked by him, the pathological critic inside started just gnawing at him. You know, "That's really cruel. You should have given him that money. You know, what's the matter with you? You're a heartless person, blah, 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 blah." Just a constant, you know, like nattering. All right. And I said, "Yeah, I can understand. That would be really painful." And he said, "Well, I don't think you quite understand all of it. It's pathological because if I had given him the money, the same thing would have happened. Are you stupid? You're giving him that money and he's going to go out and probably drink and drug and do all kinds of crazy stuff." And, you know, so he was caught in a dilemma. So the compassionate witness isn't judgmental like the pathological critic is. People have committed suicide behind that pathological critic because it's unrelenting. It'll just keep on and on and on and on. I think the pathological critic had survival value at one time, especially for children that were maltreated. Because if they had that pathological critic kind of doing the same thing to them internally as the abusive parents might have been doing externally, then if they would be one jump ahead of them, then they could be safe. So I think it did at one time have survival value, but now it's turned around. So we're going to go through the cognitive distortions real fast today to kind of give you an overview and give you a sense of how critical they are in our life to not distort our reality. Okay, so what we'll start with is my favorite cognitive distortion. And the thing about the compassionate witness is, you know, we have automatic thoughts and they just happen so fast and we don't recognize them. So that's what the compassionate witness does. Now, what happens, I think, is cognitive distortions are picked up in our family of origin. So if we're in our family of origin, people are thinking with precision and using precision, then that's what we learn. But if we're in a highly dysfunctional family, we're going to pick up all of those cognitive distortions because by the time we're 3 or 4 years old, we're hearing, you know, you should pick up your toys and you have to do this, and you know, and so those cognitive distortions get passed from one generation to another. That's, I think, a big part of the reason why dysfunction gets transmitted from one generation to another, because the thinking patterns that create that dysfunction are passed more than likely from one generation to another. Okay.